As you can see from the title, this is a presentation about Plano Regional Day School Program for the Deaf. You all are working on one of our centralized campuses, and so we've had lots of new staff come in, and we want to just make sure everybody's on the same page about roles and responsibilities and who to ask if you have any questions. Just a quick outline, we'll talk about who we are as a program, what we do for our students, and how y'all fit into the equation on our teams. And we'll give you information, so if you have any questions, you'll know who to contact to ask those questions. And just for fun, we'll sprinkle in some real life experiences that our deaf children experience, just to give you a better understanding of what they go through every day. Let's get started. Hi, we are Plano Regional Day School Program for the Deaf, and we provide services for deaf and hard of hearing students all across Collin County, and that's over 400 students. And some of the services that we provide specialized instruction for by teachers of the deaf. We provide interpreters, we provide hearing equipment, we provide cart providers, and lots of different things so that our deaf and hard of hearing kids can be successful in your classroom. Alrighty, so what we learned is Deaf Ed has lots and lots of different parts to it. And we are a one-stop shop for all of our Deaf Ed students. So if you need anything or you're struggling with something, reach out to us and we can help. We provide all of our students hearing technology with an audiologist and teachers and CART and the whole bit. So if you have any questions, please let us know. And you also learn that lip reading is a very difficult. Only about 30% of English is able to be read on the lips without any context. And so if a student doesn't have the context of what's going on, then that's going to create an even bigger problem. If they're not familiar with the vocabulary that's being talked about, that will add more issues. And we don't sit right directly in front of a student and talk to them. We move our hands, we look away, we stand at the front of the class and things like that. So that's just something to be mindful of while we're talking to our students. They might seem like they're getting everything, but there's probably quite a bit that they're missing. So it's good to check for understanding. All right, so now we're going to talk about what each of our roles are. Very brief. So the teachers of the deaf, they are specialized in teaching deaf and hard of hearing children. They have degrees in it. So they might teach students in a deaf ed classroom, and they might go into the gen ed classrooms. When they're in the gen ed classrooms, which would be your classroom, they will work with our students to modify their the language, to modify their work, and to meet them where they are, and to make sure their IEP is followed. They'll maintain contact with the team, with the gen ed teacher, with the interpreters and paraprofessionals and things to make sure that the students' needs are being met. Collaborate ideas. They'll take data for testing and all that good stuff. And they will also help with behavior management within the classroom. Paraprofessionals, they will also work with our deaf and hard of hearing students. You'll see them all over the place. They're really like the backbone of our program. And they'll work with students in deaf ed classrooms in small groups or support the teacher getting curriculum and such ready. They'll work in general education classes and reteach or help students focus and pay attention to the content, and also help with social emotional needs. And you'll also see them in other areas of the campus, moving around with our students. They support our students' language needs as well, either through sign language or listening and spoken language. They know our students' IEPs and how best to communicate with each of them. And they also manage behaviors as needed. They're kind of a secondary support in the classroom and on campus. Interpreters and CART providers, their main goal in gen ed classrooms is to facilitate communication. So in order to do that, they will show up to class on time. They will prepare ahead of time for specialized content. This could be videos or children's books. I don't know if anybody's interpreted the Wonky Donkey. That requires preparation ahead of time. Dr. Seuss books, anything that is being read aloud in class, interpreters and CART providers need it ahead of time. They will position themselves where the student can see the speaker and the presentation, what's on the board, and the interpreter all at the same time. So that might mean they sit at the front of the class, or they might need to stand up and move next to the teacher. They might need to sit in, a circle with the students during circle time. PE, they are up moving around, and so they have to find the best spot to where the student can get access to communication. They also, communication is in spoken language throughout the classroom. So if students are chit-chatting, they make sure that the deaf and hard of hearing students are able to be a part of that, to learn incidentally. They also interpret instruction as well. They interpret things that happen in the hallway or noises that are heard and things like that. They are not responsible for teaching. Classroom management, they're not to be the child's best friend or companion. We, as interpreters, our goal is to help them be deaf adults and to be able to ask for help from a teacher and to be able to communicate with their peers as well. Team leaders, we support and train staff as needed. We're on all of the campuses. We fill in during shortages. The other duties as assigned is a serious phrase that we follow. But we're here whenever y'all need us. Just reach out and we'll help out where we can. Debbie Martin is the director, and then the other team leaders are listed below. Okay, so where do you fit in this? You are our students' teachers, so you will collaborate with the team. You'll welcome the student and treat the student just as you would any other student in your classroom. You, as you're preparing, you'll give lessons and content and videos and all of that stuff to the rest of the team. So that means the deaf ed teachers or interpreters or paraprofessionals, so that we can prepare ahead of time before we get into class. You will be the one who checks for understanding for our deaf and hard of hearing students. You'll manage classroom behaviors and follow our follow the accommodations and student needs for communication access. So part of that is caption videos, interpreter placement, modified work possibly, just things like that.
So today we're going to talk about chickens. Okay? So I gave you a worksheet and you just answer the questions while I am talking. Okay? If you have any questions, raise your hand. So chickens, you have a rooster and a hen. The rooster is the male and he is around to protect all. And when you first get a hen, you have ready when they hatch, and you have to wait about 6 months for them to become big enough to lay eggs. So once they are 6 months and they start laying eggs, and they'll if they have a full life, if they're it's not stopped short by maybe raccoons or dog. So once you get the eggs, you every day and you can eat them for breakfast. It's a pretty nice pet.
So what did we learn? Hopefully you could tell by that the actor in the glasses was the student and the one doing all the talking was the teacher. And anytime the student was distracted or writing, they were missing information. So just to be mindful of that while you're talking or lecturing, if a student is chit-chatting with a friend or looking away or having to fill out notes, they're not going to be able to get all the information. So best practice would be to provide students with PowerPoints and worksheets already filled out so that they can attend to the interpreter or the cart provider or the speaker easily. This does not mean you give them homework already filled out that they need to do on their own, but notes and things like that they can learn just through the process of trial and error how to quickly highlight what's important so they can go back and look at it later. We also learned that I cannot do videos very well, but hopefully you got the point. Random do's and don'ts. A lot of this stuff is just best practice and will benefit everybody, but using visuals, our students are very visual learners. So if you're talking about a process that's happening, showing a quick video as an example. If you're talking about places or things, showing a picture of that so they can learn visually is very helpful. Being aware that, our students might miss information. There's a lot of factors that come into play. If they look away, they're missing information because they can't read your lips or they're not looking at the interpreter or cart provider. Background noise can be distracting and make them miss information. And also listening fatigue is something that our students deal with regularly because they're constantly paying attention to their surroundings. They're trying to repair language that they might have misunderstood or misheard. They're, watching an interpreter all day or reading a screen all day. So they get really tired. And so just being mindful of that, checking for understanding, maybe giving a couple extra seconds to allow our students to process and to answer questions and things. Learning sign language is also a great way to connect with our students that sign. Building a relationship, we all know, helps students learn and feel safe. And if you're able to communicate with them directly and connect with them directly, then that helps a lot. Getting a student's attention before you start speaking is important. Our students can't hear you. So if you're talking and they're not looking, they might not realize you're talking to them. They might not be able to understand what you're saying, or they have no clue that you're talking at all. So getting their attention before you start a lesson or before you ask a question helps them get their mind right so that they can pay attention and interact with you. Being inclusive and encouraging interactions, just helping our students interact with each other and learn how best to communicate with each other goes a long way to helping our kids be successful. The placing a kid next to a deaf kid so they don't talk a lot is not necessarily helpful. So just teaching our kids how to, and the hearing kids, how to interact with each other and build friendships and relationships is an awesome thing to do. Don'ts. We don't use the term hearing impaired anymore. It's deaf or hard of hearing. A lot of people still say hearing impaired, but deaf or hard of hearing is what the general population prefers now. Don't exaggerate your speech and exaggerate the way your mouth moves, or slow your speech down. That makes it very difficult to understand to hear, and it makes it very difficult to lip read if they're lip reading. Don't yell. Yelling doesn't help. And it also distorts the speech. Don't pretend to know sign language and flap your hands around. That's offensive. And, encourage students who are trying to communicate but don't know sign language to maybe learn sign language instead of pretend to sign. Don't leave the paraprofessional, the interpreter, solely in charge of that student. Be the teacher in the class for all the students and interact with the deaf student and make sure the deaf student is able to interact with their peers instead of be isolated with an adult. And don't be nervous. And for some of y'all, this will be brand new and you never had deaf students in your class, and it's really it's fun. And we have some really, really great kids. One of them's mine, so I might be a little biased, but we've got some really great kids, and it's fun to watch them grow up and to watch them learn new things and just kind of be involved in a new culture. So don't be nervous. All righty. So that was an example of something that our students might have to experience in order to watch videos during classes and things. Were you able to get all the information that was presented? No. And some of the information that you were able to decipher is because you're able to listen to the words and know what words sound like urine, urine, sounds very similar to U apostrophe REIN, urine. So many of our deaf students don't hear, so they can't figure out things phonetically or by the way they sound. So that's something to think about. And then some of the mistakes in the captions were very distracting. And so you might be stuck on a funny word or maybe a cuss word that came up. So then after that, you're missing the next few lines of captions because you're laughing or you're talking about, a funny mistake and things like that. So captions can be extremely beneficial if they're correct. If they're incorrect, a lot of the automated captions, they're getting better, but they're not great yet. And, just small mistakes that we can fix in our head because we have a good grasp of language. Many of our deaf students cannot. Taking notes while reading captions is difficult, just like the example that I showed prior to this. When you're looking down to write, you're missing information. So giving students a copy of the notes is beneficial. And then younger students or students that aren't reading on level, they aren't going to benefit from captions either, because if you can't read, you can't get information. So captions benefit everybody, hearing and deaf. We have captions on at our home, and I am forever missing auditorily what's said, but then I pick it up from the captions. So just something to think about. Here's the transcript. You can pause this if you want to read it again. I just quickly fixed some stuff, so there are still some typos and things in there. All right, so I hope this wasn't too boring. We are super excited to have y'all on our team and to help us educate our deaf kids. This training was just a very brief overview. There's tons that goes into deaf ed and teaching. I understand that. And my hope is that we can all work as a team to find out what works best for our kids. If you have any questions, please talk to any of the deaf ed staff members on your campus. And again, the team leaders are listed earlier in this presentation, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. We are here to help any way that we can. Thanks.